The brains in the household was my sister, not me. Dude, I like money. And he said, computers, man, you got to be in computers. Biology's not going to get it. For me, was I just didn't know if I could work for anybody else. I'd had a couple of jobs when I was young, and most of them I walked out of.
Hello, everyone. So glad that you joined us again for the What You're About podcast with me, Chad Abood. And this is where we break down how inspiring leaders and entrepreneurs have uncovered their natural gifts and had the courage to use their gifts to pursue incredible success and happiness. And I'm just so happy today because we have someone who has had an incredible career, spanned many industries, but never forgets about the importance of the fulfillment and how he lives beyond the success. And so, I know we're going to get into it, with him in these moments that could have been easier to play it safe. And he still dug into like what he truly valued, what was special about him. And so I just think he epitomizes the reason why I created this podcast, because what I'm most passionate about is helping people find their greatness and making the way forward easier. And my guest, John Lindsey, has just done it. And I'm actually really curious because I've seen you do it, John. I've seen you on LinkedIn. I've seen you at the Parodies, but I'm not sure I really know how you figured out, the greatness that's within you to be thoughtful, funny, lift people. Like, I'm going to be really curious. So I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad we get to celebrate your journey and learn from you today, my friend. So, for everyone that's listening, if you're on LinkedIn, and if you know me, then you already know John, because John's everywhere. Of course, he has Insight Legal Tech and the Pulse Check, and we're going to get into, that side of his business, of which he has many. But you also know him for the parody songs, and he's thoughtful, he's engaging, he's curious, he's friendly, he lifts everyone around him. He's a community builder. John, thank you so much for sharing some time today, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me on here, man. I love your work too. We're also friends. So, I cheer you on all the time. And I know you do the same for everybody else. And I think we're kindred spirits from that respect, even though I'm a heck of a lot older than you. But I'm absolutely honored to be here. And I was excited. There's a lot of podcasts I do that I'm necessarily so excited to do. This one, when I saw what you were doing here, I thought, this is perfect. I can't wait to get on with you and talk things through. And because I think we share very similar philosophies and beliefs about life and business.
For sure. And for everyone that's listening, like, here's an example that showed the words that John just shared. So when I first started out on LinkedIn, this was around April 2021. I've been posting a little bit. I didn't have, so many people reading it maybe, but somehow John came across some of my posts. And after a little while, he was the first person that said, that I didn't know already, that said, hey, we should get on a call and connect. And I think we had a Zoom scheduled, and Zoom broke down, and you called me, from your cell, and you're like, I just didn't want to miss the chance to do this. And I remember telling you, because you had already been doing the parodies, and everyone already knew who you were. And I was saying, like, I don't know, I'm just trying to share some ideas that I have about how, the legal industry could be more human and we can enjoy our careers more. And I remember you saying, hey man, you're part of the family now. And I'll never forget that, because it let me know that my message belonged somewhere. And this is what you do, John, for people. So I wanted everyone to know that that was the first phone call that I ever had with John, and that's what he does for people. So, we're talking about the endpoint, but I want to get to kind of the beginning. You've had such a wide-ranging and amazing career, but can you take us back to like some of the earlier goals and ideas for your future? Like, what were you planning on being when you were young John? Was it, or younger John? Was it fireman? Was it astronaut? Like, what was going on in there?
It's funny, Chad. When I get asked this question, sometimes people just don't believe it, but I was not a very goal-oriented person. So the brains in the household was my sister, not me. And I remember my parents all the time. My sister would bring home straight A's, and if she ever got a B, they'd be, going, "Gosh, what happened? How could you get a B?" And I'd bring home my C's and D's, and it's okay, John. It's going to be all right, buddy. you'll find something to do, I'm sure. So it was that kind of, the expectations weren't exceptionally high, let's say. And so by the time I got to college, I remember this like it was yesterday. I'm on the golf course with my cousin who also happened to go to Mason at the same time I did. And he says, what are you going to do when you're done school? And I said, wow. He said, well, you're a biology major. You're not going to make any money, right? This, I think, is maybe sophomore year. And I said, well, what should I do? I like money. And he said, computers, man, you got to be in computers. Biology's not going to get it done. So then I remember the next day I went down and sat down with the guidance counselor. I'm like, I got to change. My cousin told me I'm not going to make any money. And I got to make some money. So let's fix this. And so I shifted over to, computers, and the rest is history. I found something. I went, wow, so I'm not very smart in school, and I just never had the academic wherewithal, and maybe not even the desire. But when I found that, it's thought, whoa, this is fun. This is cool. People don't know it yet, but all the people that are computer nerds at one point are going to be cool. You could just see it. You could see it happening, right? It was just one of those things that hadn't happened yet. It was still way back in the D-base days, but it was like, you could see it coming. This was going to be good. And so I just got on that train and followed it, and thought, the other piece for me was I just didn't know if I could work for anybody else. I'd had a couple jobs when I was young, and most of them I walked out of. When they told me to mop the floor, I thought, I don't really feel like mopping the floor. I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm leaving. So I couldn't find anything where I kept thinking, wow, I don't feel like I have what it takes to make a really good employee. So, when I got out of school, I tried to be an employee for about 6 months, and I realized everybody else made the money and I didn't, and that I didn't really love being told what to do. And I thought, gosh, got to be a better way. And I remember my parents always saying, Chet, they would tell me, just go get a job and work 30 years and you'll have what we have. And, we grew up poor. So I remember thinking, why am I going to look, a lot of love in the house. Don't get me wrong. I was adopted. Right, it's beautiful upbringing. It was the best ever. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but we were poor. They were living paycheck to paycheck. And I remember thinking, why am I going to take my financial advice from people that weren't able to do it themselves? Right. So they're telling me to get a job and do what they do. And I'm thinking, I'm looking, we don't have a lot of things that we'd like to have. And there's a reason for that. So I think I'm on a different path. And so I just did. I just thought, what does it take to just go start a business? And I just did a little research and went, wow, it takes nothing. Right. So, what do you have to do? You got to go find people to pay you money for a skill. And we had some computer skills cooking at that time. And I had some friends of mine that had kind of felt the same way. And so we just went, let's do it. What do we have to lose? Right. We were young. We were single. We were already eating ramen noodles. It couldn't get much worse. Maybe live under a bridge or something. But at that point, it doesn't seem like it's risky at that time. Right.
Right. What do you think it was? You had tried academically and a little bit from some jobs as you were growing up, and you hadn't found a fit yet, and you didn't even feel that motivated. And so you get this advice, which seems, there's a financial motivator, which, now that we see maybe from your past, you could understand that connection about like how that could be an immediate driver. Like, okay, I see a financial future. What was it when you got into the classroom and you switched majors about computers that all of a sudden like clicked for you? Because I imagine there's tons of people that will listen to this because I also felt this way, that I'm in a career that I've been trained to do, but I don't feel a deep connection to the work. And so what was it when you switched majors from biology to computers that you said like, oh, I feel this connection? Like thinking back, do you remember what it was? Like what drove that feeling?
It was the fact that you could create something. That was the cool part to me. The cool part to me was, in biology, we were studying everything that was. It was just like, okay, well, we know this, right? And, and look, biology played a big part into DNA, and DNA played a big part into some of the things that we did down the road. So it's really good to have the background. But at the end of the day, it was, wow, we can create things that help other people do things better and other people do things faster. It was all of a sudden like, I've never built anything, right? I mean, it was like, wow, I can build whatever I want to with this. And your imagination all of a sudden goes wild. And so, and it also just clicked. Now, it didn't click that much. I'll give you a funny story, because my two partners, when we started out doing this, were really good software developers, and I wasn't. So business gets going and we're making some money, and they come to me in my office one day and they sit me down and they go, John, we're really good software developers and you suck, your sales. And I'm like, oh, that's just cold. Did you really just say that to me? And then I remember thinking after a while going, yeah, I was only okay, right? I really wasn't all that good. And I realized at that point, the reason that they said that was, it was true, but it was also that, we had a little different personality. They weren't able to go out and communicate these solutions to other people. And somebody needed to do that, right? So I thought, okay, well, that's even better. So that's when I realized there's really a role for me in business, because I can take what I know and I don't have to really apply it. I can just share it with the people who need to hear the story. And I can talk educated enough about it because I know how to do it, but I don't do it that well. But there's a need, because if somebody can't articulate that to the clients as to what that solution is going to mean to them, with the
Right. Then you
value
just
they
have a
bring,
good product and you
yeah,
can't sell it.
they can't sell it. That's right. And at the end of the day, that's when it hit me that, okay, wait a second. Every business is really just a sales organization, right? If you can't sell it, you're broke. So, hey, I'm more important than I thought I was. So that was kind of the start of it. It was like, okay, wait a second. I got this skill. I don't really have to do it, thank goodness, because apparently I'm not that great at it. But boy, if I couple it with being able to just share a message, it works. And it was really that simple.
You know what's so great about that? I'm seeing this arc now of like the creator communicator, and it's clearly been so true over your entire career. Like I even think now with, Insight Legal Tech and the Pulse Check and the Parodies, like you see opportunity to create something. It doesn't mean that you force yourself to be the one that plugs in all the ones and zeros. Like you find people where that's their thing. And then your thing is to be knowledgeable enough about the gap and what's being created, but you have this desire to communicate that. And so, do you feel like the first time you really felt this was the computer entrepreneurial piece? Or when you look back over your life, like, was there any other time where you would say to yourself, like, yeah, I see, like I was a good communicator of ideas, or was that the start of it?
It's actually funny you asked me that, because when I think to my younger days and the kind of the trouble that we used to get in as adolescents, and it was mischief, it wasn't really bad,
Right.
but there would always be somebody that would have to talk us out of those situations, right? And,
Right.
and I noticed at the time that a lot of my friends would be behind me at that point, right? Because they didn't have the ability to be able to come up with some story. And I remember thinking, gosh, I've always got to come up with the story. And it means sometimes I get in trouble because I'm the one who's talking. But at the end of the day, there's a message, and I feel like I'm good at communicating that message. And I think that's, back to your point about finding some of your gifts. Uh, you know, that never intimidated me. It never really intimidated me to try to share a message with somebody and make them see value in what I'm saying, right? And I've learned early on that that's a really important skill in business, right? You have to, the demonstration of value is critical to anybody, number one, believing in you, trusting in you, and then ultimately handing you their money. Right.
I love that. I love that frame up about realizing something you're decent at with like the computer coding, but not great at, maybe is a 5 out of 10 for you, but then seeing the creation, and the storytelling being like a 9 out of 10, and realizing that maybe that's exactly where you should be deploying as much of your energy as possible. Like you could take these things that you're low or average skilled at and spend a career's worth of energy trying to make them a bit better, and you would make them a bit better. But you're the one who sees gaps easily and isn't afraid of communicating them. And what I'm always trying to tell people is that there's no better or worse. It's better or worse for you. And lots of people would say, actually, John, I think actually the creation of the ones and zeros is the important thing. That's what I love to do. And telling the story, actually, I'm not interested in that. I don't see the value. And all of it's valid if it matters to you. And so I think this is where I even look at, where your career took you with all the businesses and being CEO and being the face and telling the story. It also means, like when you were a kid, that sometimes you also have to take the fall for it because you're the one communicating the story. And so clearly you're not afraid to be out front and center for the wins, the lumps, the losses, because that's something that I'm curious about too. When you started your career, and you've talked about this a lot, when you do a lot of startups and you try new things and you try to go after gaps that other people didn't see, they don't all win. Before we started recording, you were using baseball analogies to tell me, like how you think you've been doing over time, and you'd be a great baseball player. With those averages. But tell me what that was like. So you're like building this entrepreneurial journey. You see your specific gift. Thankfully, your partners see it in you too. And what worked well with it and what was hard? Like what were some of the doubts or the challenges to get through?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're right. I mean, we've failed lots, right? Because, we tried a lot of stuff, right? And we weren't afraid to try those things. And have I gotten more risk averse as I gotten older? Probably a little bit, but not a lot. I mean, I think part of this is that's the exciting part of it, right? When you see something that you want to go after, you give it a shot, and you could lose, and it's okay to lose. There's nothing wrong with that. We lose all the time, and as I pointed out to you, we bat probably about 300. And in business, just like in baseball, sometimes that's enough to get you into the Hall of Fame, right? You don't hit on every time. Singles are okay. There's nothing wrong with hitting singles, and there's nothing wrong with striking out. Most of our strikeouts, Chad, have led us to other opportunities that we would have never found out about if we didn't go up and strike out first, right? So they've always been, you hear people say it, it's a little cliche that you learn from the failures, but in my life, that's always been the case. I mean, there's always something positive that comes out of stuff you don't want to go through, and you get stronger doing that. And so, there's never really, there's not a recipe per se for finding the right things to chase after in business. You see an opportunity and you decide whether the timing feels right. And for me, it's mostly been in my gut, right? Do I feel that tingling in there that says this is worth going after, right? This is worth investing my time, taking risk with other people's lives. Because Chad, look, we employ people, right? And that means that they're making their mortgage payments and buying their groceries based on the decisions that we all make. So, there's a real serious, as much as you and I have a ton of fun and what people may see from me on LinkedIn looks like fun, there's also a very, very serious, very, very responsible component to being, a business leader and a business owner. Other people's lives and livelihood is dependent upon decisions you make. We don't take that lightly. So the risks are always extremely calculated, but we feel like you can't get anywhere if you don't take those kinds of risks. So it's just something that's not scared us because we expect to fail periodically because we're human beings. We all fail.
I think that's actually a really good way of thinking about how to break through the challenge. Is your default expectation and definition of success includes failing. And that's not that common. That's something that always was very inspiring for me when we would talk, is that you expected there's going to be some level of failure because you're trying to do something that isn't so obvious or 1,000 people haven't done before, because you're trying to do it in your way and you're trying to create value. But that means there's a failure. And what I think is really powerful about that is that the element of failure I find that really breaks us down is the shock. It's the distance between expectation and reality. It's actually not that you swung and missed. It's that in your mind, you thought it was going to be a home run every time. And that expectation distance is hard. How did you get to this place where, was it just through the trial and experience, or did you always have this in you where, yeah, it's totally normal and acceptable that I'm going to try really hard and it's not always going to work?
Well, it's funny, back to your gifts, right? To recognizing your gift. I didn't think that being of average intelligence was a gift. I always thought my sister was, I thought, wow, you got it all and I didn't get anything. What happened? How did I get that, right? But you realize, and I realized this as a young kid because of the same way my parents treated me, is that when the expectations are lower, the pressure is also lower, right? So the pressure on my sister that she shared with me later in her life that she felt to bring home those grades, I never felt. I felt like, wow, if I don't fail, my parents are going to congratulate me. So there's always been an element of don't worry about it, right? I mean, you've made it every what am I looking for? Every step in life, we've still been able to take, I've still been able to take, even though I haven't been as smart as a lot of people, and that's okay, right? So I recognized my limitations very, very early on. And I realized as a leader, you see this quite often. You'll see it particularly in your domain where lawyers are expected to know everything. I understand I don't know a lot, but what I do know is that you have to have a good idea. You have to have smart people to execute it. And you have to have people to remove the obstacles and pay them a lot of money to go do it. And if you can be the guy who facilitates that, and then hire the best people and not be intimidated by them, let them do what you hired them to do because they are 100 times smarter than you, then good things happen. And so I've always known that my role in any business that I play is to find the opportunity, right? And then get the right people to go solve that problem and then give them everything they need to do it, right? To be successful. And then if they are, they did it. And if they're not, it was my fault, right? That's really what it's all about, is that people want that challenge. They don't maybe want to take the entire risk like we do as
Right.
So if they get to feel like an entrepreneur inside of a company, but they're not really taking all the risk, then they get to feel the same thing I feel in a different way. So
Yeah.
my job is just to find those people that want that desperately and that know how smart they are. And they're not afraid to challenge me. They're not afraid to take on these challenges. They just don't necessarily have maybe the things that they need to run the entire business, or they don't want that appetite. But you put those people in the right position and then you just get the heck out of their way. That's my skill. My skill is
Right.
knowing that don't meddle. You're not smart enough that you hire these smart people, let them be smart. You just make sure they have everything they need, pay them a hell of a lot of money so they don't want to leave and go anywhere else, right? And then the last piece, fun. Make sure they're having some fun while they do it, right? It's been a core value for us. There's nothing, you know me long enough to know nothing I do, nothing I do, it's got to have fun in it or I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Even when
Yeah.
times
Well,
are fun.
you're very aware about the human condition. Like, I don't know if this is something that's always been a thread for your life, but you're very aware about what brings people together, what motivates them, and you come at it from an honest way, but you're also aware of it, like you were describing there about people have different motivators. Some people it's financial, some people it's the project, some people it's the enjoyability with their coworkers, some people it's a mix. And to be tapping into all those things, that's what allows you to build community, whether it's inside your organization or in a broader community like you do so well on LinkedIn. And so if I'm listening to this, it sounds like, okay, I get the model, but when has it been really hard? When has it been really hard to follow the model? And so you're saying to yourself, I think I got an idea. I think I'm sourcing the right people, but you felt this pressure to play it safer, either with where you were trying to take a business or even within yourself. And how do you found that you pushed through that, or did it knock you back one and then you had to start again?
I think, there's a couple things, at least for me. Timing is one of them. You can kind of tell when you get something started if the timing is right, right? And if it's not,
Mm.
and all the things start working against you, then there's a certain time where you just have to say, it's probably not the right time. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this because they'll call it quitting, and I don't call it quitting at all. What I call it is, a recognition or realization, right? That there is sometimes it's not going to work, and it doesn't matter how hard I push it or we push it. And putting people in situations like that, it's depressing to them. It's demoralizing sometimes. So if the market conditions weren't right when we started something, maybe it's a great idea, but it's not a great idea now. Then,
Right.
recognizing that early on is something that I think we've been okay doing. We've been okay saying, hey, we thought this was a good idea. Guess what? Turns out it wasn't. Let's do something different. So quitting, it's not really quitting, but, a hard pivot, I would call it, to say, maybe you mothball it for a little while, or maybe you pick up, do something else, or maybe you take that technology and turn it into something else. But you got, the
Right.
market timing and conditions have a lot to do with how things work. And, the other piece of it, Chad, is just luck, man. I mean, it really is. I mean, if you do it enough times, sometimes you just get lucky, right? There's a lot of times we've been successful where we weren't as prepared as we should have been. We didn't have the best product by any means. It was just timing and market conditions, and we got luck. We got lucky. And there's a lot of times when we've done our best, absolute best work, and you think this has to work, and it doesn't, right? And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have anything to do with what we did necessarily. And I think having the maturity to understand that that's not you, right? It doesn't have to kill you inside. It doesn't have to take you down. It's not a reflection of your intelligence or your drive or any of that. It's just what it is, being in business. And it's back to the relief pitchers or the batters that are going to strike out 7 out of 10 times. We strike out. We just do. And as human beings, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with failing. And so that's a message I preach, and I have forever and ever and ever, is to say, look, if I'm leading this company and I make at least a dozen mistakes before noon, you guys don't need to fear making mistakes. It's not going to get you fired, right? Don't do anything illegal, don't do anything immoral, right? But if you're trying real hard, you make some mistakes. You know what? Rock on, keep trying, right? You're going to make mistakes.
Yeah, you lead by example. You lead by example, and that's what resonates with people so much, right? And whether you're doing that on LinkedIn, inside your organizations, as you have for decades, is people feel that vulnerability, right? It actually gives them power. I think this is where a lot of folks get confused. And if I'm doing some sort of project or consulting with a professional services organization, folks are very worried about being vulnerable and admitting times that they have made mistakes. They're going to make more mistakes. They may be making a mistake today because they feel like they need to show that they're impenetrable because they're the model of success. Well, I've been in the rooms as the audience, and I've been in the smaller rooms later when segments of the audience break off and ask each other what they thought of it. And it doesn't land because nobody believes it. They've either seen your mistakes or they just know everyone's human. And so what I'm always trying to share with people is, if you want to build engagement in your workforce and have them be the most productive they can be, which they can only do if they take chances, you actually have to show them how you've done it and failed first. And so I think that's an incredible message, and no doubt why you've been so successful. You also brought up something else I think is important, and I share with a lot of people in coaching, is inputs versus outputs. Like, you talk a lot about, in your own words, inputs. We try to make the right decisions. We try to see the gaps. We try to hire the right people, versus your definition of success not being focused on the outputs, because you can't control always the timing in the market, whether people have other opportunities, what other competitors show up. You can't control those outputs. And so I think that that's something that's really important. And I would love to know how you've, been building, whether it's with Insight, with your brand. Like, how did you focus on the inputs that are within you to decide to do the parodies, and how you built your community here, and how that's kind of played into your work and your life, and what has that brought to you, over the last few years that you've been doing that?
Well, the parodies is funny because I think it's actually a perfect example of recognizing what the market is doing, right? When we started that business, our sales team was keen enough to say, John, business has changed significantly, and a lot of our core businesses don't require marketing. They're long-term contracts. They don't turn over much. They're not. It's not the kind of things that you have to market or be on social media to do. And so when we looked at doing Insight, it was one of those ones where everybody agreed that it really does need reach and awareness for people to understand what it is we're doing. And so we looked at it and said, gosh, we don't really know a lot about that. What are we going to do? We got to take some risk here. And so, as I've told you before, I've never sang in my life. I've never done a parody in my life. I don't typically wear wigs or my wife's clothes. And, it was one of those things where when you look at LinkedIn, you say, wow, there's 1 billion people out here. And I'm not young, right? I don't have 20 years to build this particular business. I got about 3 to 5, which means this has to be accelerated. So we have to do something dramatically different. We have to create that awareness. And then, more importantly than just creating the awareness, we have to tie the awareness and reach into the solution that we're trying to sell. So there has to be a message in there that people can decipher outside of the silly, charades on the parodies piece. And so it's just another example where you look at it and it's just the mother of necessity, right? You just say, okay, well, there's no other way I know to get there because I don't have a lot of those skills. But what I could potentially do is rely on some self-deprecating humor because I'm almost 60 years old. What's somebody going to say? Would I do this when I was 30? Probably not. Might be career suicide, right? But at my age, what is someone going to say? And I noticed really early on, Chad, you know this too, LinkedIn, I don't know a lot about social media. I don't do any others. I always thought social media was people coming at you, talking about how, they're backbiting and that kind. LinkedIn is the most polite platform I've ever seen in my entire life. And I get it now because these are careers and they're not going to say things at work that they would say at home. Maybe they're not going to be that comfortable, right? So this platform, in the familia that you and I and everyone in our family of LinkedIn community, we all support each other. So I knew that pretty quickly on that even taking this big of a risk, people would probably not chastise me publicly for doing it. And somebody out there is going to go, wow, it's different enough. I'll build it up. I'll tell you, you took a risk and I'll reward it by saying congratulations. And so that's how we looked at it. We just looked at it as another way to do something different than I could see anyone else out there doing. And we needed differentiation to create reach and awareness. And so it was just one of those ideas.
Well, and you use your gifts. You use your gifts to do it, man, because you were a creator and you communicated, right? You're not worried about being the message teller. You're not worried about taking it on the chin if it didn't work, but you saw a gap. People weren't really doing it. You knew that it was a way to express a message about something that you helped create that you weren't coding the ones and zeros on. And so it's such a perfect example of like your natural gifts that you've been using your whole career. And the proof is in the community you've built. Like there's a lot of people that post on LinkedIn a lot more than you. There's a lot of people that are sharing, much different styles than you. You're posting, typically once a week. And the community that you built is enormous, in part because you spend a lot of your energy celebrating other people. Like when you see things that you think are making any industry better, I see you out there lifting it up. And whether it's creating awards for innovators, whether it's celebrating people for what they're doing, John, like that matters. And so how have you found that element of like recognizing the greatness in others? How has that played into the businesses that you've built too?
Part of it is just, and you'll get this with age. I don't think you get this without age because, again, I'm getting to the end of my career, right? And so I don't maybe get to do as many successful things where there's a finish line like I used to be able to do. And so when I see others doing it, I remember how it felt to me. I remember how I felt like I conquered something. I remember how I felt like I was successful at something. It just felt good. And so when I see other people doing it, I know the feeling. And so I want to share and go, that is awesome. I know how that feels. You should be so proud of yourself. And, if nobody's told you so, I'm telling you right now, congratulations, because it's no small feat, right? Every step that people take like that, to take that kind of risk and they find some success in it like that, it's just so easy to celebrate because I've felt the feeling. You're doing it now. You know what it feels like. You told me before we started. The reward you feel inside by finding a gift, capitalizing on that gift, and then turning it into something that can create a livelihood for your family. It's just, not everybody gets to do that. And so when I see the people out there that are trying to do it, whether they're successful or not, because look, I needed people in my life when we weren't successful to tell me to keep going, right? There's lots of times I felt like quitting. And so when I look at this and go, wow, I see people out there trying really hard, just like I used to try. And I remember somebody in my ear going, John, it's okay this time. You're going to make it the next time. Just don't quit. That's what moves me. And I just love seeing people be successful. I mean, it's just so much fun. Why do we cheer for athletes? Why do we cheer at the end of a movie when Rocky wins, right? It's just, it's an underdog story because they're just people like you and I. And when they knock it out of the park like that, you're just like, stand back and just applaud because you know how they feel.
And it has like a much bigger impact than you might think, because not everyone's going to communicate back to you like how much it mattered to them. I don't know if I've told you that story that we started the podcast with about, when you said to me in our first phone call, like you're part of the family, when I wasn't sure if I was going to continue on a LinkedIn journey, but that stuff stays with people and it helps them, accelerate their career. And so whether you're doing it inside your organization, on a social media platform, like wherever you're doing it, I say this to people all the time. Like I have a group coaching program around building a LinkedIn brand. Well, I don't really start with posting. I don't start with building your profile page. What I start with is knowing what you're about and then using that information to celebrate others that you see are doing great work. Because that is what actually you feel good celebrating others. You feel better about yourself. And by writing, by celebrating, by letting people know the thoughts that are in your mind, you actually become like more clear what you're about because you see what you're celebrating. You see the words that you use and it's as impactful to you as it is to them. And I call that like human scale. There's tech scale, but I think there's human scale and just letting people know the real words that are going through your mind. And you're just so incredible for that, John. I think I even still have my award just over my head that you sent me for, innovators and you breathe that into LinkedIn, into the world, my friend. But I'm curious where things are going now. So, you have lots of businesses with Insight Legal Tech being one of them. Where are you looking at yourself saying, like in your own ear, saying, hey, John, you got to keep following your gifts. Don't play it safe. Like, where are you pushing yourself today?
Well, it's funny because you and I were talking before this started about a pretty massive failure I've got in one of my divisions. And I won't go into the details of it, but it's been pretty painful. And again, it's the same kind of thing where, some people don't ever talk about their failures. I have no problem whatsoever talking about my failures because it's a period of time I want to get through as fast as I can. I want to learn something from it and I want to move on to whatever's next. And so for some people going through what I'm going through right now in one of our business lines, might wake up and go, gosh, I've had enough. I don't want to do this anymore. And so for me, what it's done is it showed me that, wow, I hate failure inside a business. I hate being part of it. I want to take another line of business that we've got right now and really just mash on the gas because I want that feeling again that I know how to do this. I don't want to feel like it's time to put me out to pasture, right? Because I'm not a young guy, and business, a lot of times people look at people my age and go, it's way too late for you to start anything. Well, I don't subscribe to that theory. I think if you've got the passion for it, there's no time that's not a good time to go for it if you've got the drive. And so for me right now, it's back in building mode. I had a pretty big setback in one of the divisions. Others are doing well enough for us to be able to focus on growing something new. And right now, that's what we're trying to do. So I've got inside our legal tech division, we've got some things that we're going to be adding to that suite of tools that we have that I think are going to make it into a much bigger player in the industry. I love the legal space. I love what I'm learning. I love the fact that people like you have accepted me because look, you guys are really, in case you don't know it, lawyers are really smart. That's what I've seen. And so to have a guy like me come in and be able to serve in an industry where everybody's brilliant, it's a moving thing for me because I didn't think I was going to be accepted here. And now not only have I been accepted, but we've been ingratiated into firms to help them do better. And that to me is it warms my heart that I get to participate with people that are as brilliant as you guys. And so that drives me. The other piece is, and I'll never, Chad, I told you, I grew up poor. I don't ever forget that, right? I mean, I had one goal, and I know goals were something that we focused on before we started recording this. We were talking about, and my only goal in life was to not have to balance my checkbook. That was it. I watched my parents sit there at the table every Friday night, and try to figure out how there were 3 cents left, right? And I thought, if my only goal in life is to never have to do that, then I've been successful. That's the only goal I had when I started all of this. It was just don't want to do that, right? I don't want to do that. And it still drives me to this day because I don't forget what it felt like to watch them sit at that table and struggle. Broke my heart.
Yeah. Well, and you're still using your gifts to do it. Like I think about what you just described about where you're taking the business now is you're creating and communicating the story, right? And you're going to have other people come in that help you with the ones and zeros and build out the details of it. But you see a gap, you see how you can build something greater, and no doubt you're going to be the face communicating the story because that's your gift. And so, last question for you. What is something, whether it's like a tip or something that you would tell kind of that earliest John starting out on this journey to like keep in the back of his mind for anyone that's listening that's saying, well, I don't have a portfolio of successful businesses now. Like, what is something that you would offer the earlier you to hang on to have the courage to keep driving forward with the gifts that you have?
I would say that you have to acknowledge that it's going to be hard. It is hard starting a business. It's hard running a business. It's hard sustaining a business. It's hard. And so if anybody tells you anything different, then they've had a very different experience than me. And hard doesn't mean it's something that you don't want to do. Hard doesn't mean it can't be fun, because it can, but it's hard. If you look behind me, these hats are they're Ironman races. It's hard, but you know what? I love doing it because it's the challenge. And so I didn't know back then. And it's probably good I didn't, because I might have quit. I didn't know how hard it was going to be. And if somebody had cautioned me about what to expect in terms of when I hit those periods of time when I'm just going to doubt myself and my confidence is going to be at its lowest point and I'm going to want to quit. If somebody would have told me ahead of time that that's how I'm going to feel, I would have been ready for it. Because in the triathlon community, they do, Chad. They tell you how hard it's going to be. So when you hit there and you get there, you go, yep, I knew it was coming. You guys told me this. You're going to have the worst conversation with yourself ever because you're going to want to quit. I knew it was coming. In business, I didn't know it was coming. And I think if I would have known, I could have better prepared myself mentally for the tough times.
That's really, really good advice. And, as I'm going on my own entrepreneurial journey, I'm going to keep that with me about it is going to be hard. It's also meant to be hard. And so it's not something that you're supposed to avoid or something that's not supposed to happen to you. It is supposed to happen. And that's part of it. And I think that one thing that you're great at, as you were talking about the challenges in one of your divisions, when you actually express out loud the things that are going on in your mind, I think it can take the edge off of it a little bit. It allows it to like breathe and get some perspective. And so whether you're sharing good thoughts that you have to like lift other people, or whether you're sharing the frustration about something that you dislike, that you want to change, it gives that emotion a chance to have like more of an objective feel to it instead of just spiraling. And you're really great at that, John. And so, I think that advice, the advice about knowing that it's meant to be hard. But if you're using your natural gifts towards something that you deeply care about, maybe that's a good thing too. Maybe that journey's still beautiful.
No, I think it's a great point. And Chad, that's what you're opening up for people in your business. I think, the route that I took to figure out what those gifts were, if I had a mentor like yourself to be able to say, okay, here's what you need to be looking for. Here's the signs. Here's what I went through, right, to find my gifts. I think these are things that didn't exist, or I didn't have access to them when I was young. And if I did, to have that kind of mentorship, I think to help people find out what they're good at without having to make all the mistakes. You're still going to make mistakes, but without having to make all the mistakes, right? If you can find those gifts early on in life and capitalize on them sooner, then you're going to make the path. It might not be easier, but you're going to have the confidence in yourself to know that you are where you're supposed to be, right? I think the key to the whole thing is, like I said, even though it's hard, you're supposed to be there because you have a mission to accomplish and it's okay, right? But if you have the tools to make it happen, you're not concerned about the hard because you've got the gifts to do it, right? I mean, so I think that's what's so cool about what you're doing right now, because when I look back to think, okay, gosh, how much smoother could the path have been for somebody like me if I could have found out what those gifts were earlier on and started to deploy them? What kind of difference could that have made? And the answer is, I don't know the answer to that, but I know that it absolutely would have given me more confidence, because look, I just like everybody else, like you, I suffer from imposter syndrome. And so when I start doubting my gifts, right? And so, having somebody find those gifts, cultivate those gifts, and come to a real grip and an understanding that those gifts are real and they're never going to leave you. Those gifts are yours. You're going to have those gifts and you're going to be able to use them wherever you need them, like a sword. You can pull it out anytime you need it. And it's there for you. I think that's a critical piece to people making, you said it earlier, their personal lives are going to be better because of it, because they're going to use those gifts in their families, right? They're going to have better listening skills and EQ, and it's just going to make your life better when you're focused on the things you're really, really good at. So what you're doing, man, if I could have had that 30 years ago, I probably would have retired 25 years ago.
I appreciate you, man. Listen, it took me like 10 years of therapy and my own coaching and 2 years of writing on LinkedIn to get here. I think one thing that is tricky sometimes, and it was for me, is that we don't always know the things that are special for us. We don't always know they're our greatest assets. Sometimes we think they're our weaknesses. Sometimes we don't even really know they exist because they're so easy for us. They're things that we don't need carrots and sticks to do. They're things that we think are intuitive for everyone. And so we don't realize that they're our greatest gifts. And instead, we just think, well, that's who we are and that's who everyone else is. Well, the truth is that's not the way. We all have our own collection of unique skills, just like yours is the creator, the storyteller, the guy who's willing to be at the front of the line, taking the risk. That's not easy for everyone. And the things that are harder for you, those are easy for other folks. And so that's the beauty of why I love this work, is that I already know everyone has the assets in them. It's just that we haven't been taught how to uncover them, how to test them to make sure that we know that's what they are, to create the clarity and confidence in them, and then how to bake them into their lives so that we're using our 9s out of 10 all the time, and thankfully, organically you came to that place through, a lot of effort and trial. But I appreciate you for inspiring so many others to see you as an example and say to themselves, listen, if he can build this business and he recognizes his gifts and he's willing to put them out there, then maybe I can too. And you just give that to so many, John. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. I know I learned so much. I think about it for my own entrepreneurial journey that I'm going on. So I appreciate you for that. And for everyone that's been listening to this, I hope that wherever you were, at home, at work, that you took this away. You took John's message away, and hopefully one little piece that you can take with you to realize your gifts and become more confident in them and have more clarity in how you're going to use them. So, whether it's for yourself or you think someone in your network should hear this message, I hope that you share it with them. And I'd love to know your thoughts. So feel free to, comment, let John or I know, questions or what you think about it. And, thank you all so much. Thank you, John. Thank you for listening, and wish you all an incredible day. Thanks, John.
Appreciate it, Chad. My pleasure, my friend.